how we feel about the current situation in the country, lockdown, which is born into this, and then we will talk about something else, exercise. I know you're very sporty, Aaron, and I know Peter is very sporty as well now. And then we were going to talk about Joe Rogan. And if you don't know why he's in the news, I have thoughts, and you can tell me what you think about my thoughts. Okay? What are we drinking?
Nothing.
That's unusual for us. Normally we crack on with something a bit stronger. Anyway, good morning or afternoon or wherever we are in the world. This is the very first time we've ever done it, and it's going to be terrible because the first time a child plays a violin is always terrible. But if you don't do that, you never get great music. So learn by doing, I think. So we are, well, I would describe myself as a sort of center-right person, and I have a friend who I consider to be a little bit terrifying, Aaron, and I also have another good friend, Peter, who is a bit more measured. And I would just wondered how we felt about all the things that go on in the world. I don't know why we're qualified to talk about it, but if not us, then who? Would the joke ever be funny enough? No. Get on stage and do it. Just try. Anyway, how do we feel about being locked in our houses and judged for going to the shops? I just went to the shop and I gave up. I only wanted a carrot and I had to join a queue. It was horrendous. Why? What has happened to this country? What do you think, Aaron?
I find it amusing that you kind of like complain about that, only because of the fact that there's always been this ongoing joke about socialism and how, you know, when you are in a socialist country, like for instance, you know, Cuba or the former USSR, people fell in line to go into groceries. And then now it's ironic that, you know, we are actually in the same, in kind of like a similar situation, but obviously not caused by in the socialism, but people complain about it. So I guess that's kind of like a bit of a taster for all you lefties out there who, you know, who still wants to kind of like, you know, subscribe to this ideology.
Want to queue for a potato? You can try it out now before we buy.
Exactly.
And the rate we're bankrupting the country means that we can get there all the more quicker. The socialist republic that we can look forward to will be upon us very soon. I mean,
but to get back onto your point, to your question, Simon, how do I feel about it? Is that, you know, it's I think a necessary evil at the moment. I mean, I don't particularly enjoy it. I don't like, you know, standing in line in my local Sainsbury's, you know, for 5-10 minutes just to go in. No one likes that. I mean, we enjoy the conveniences of our regular normal life pre-March this year. But you know, unfortunately, at the moment, it is an unnecessary evil. However, I do think that, you know, there has to be measures put in place to actually return us back to normality as soon as possible. And I don't think that that's something that the government's actually doing at this point in time.
Yeah, we don't seem to be getting back to work very quickly. But I mean, how will we know when it's safe to go outside? We can't see this thing. We don't know. There's measures, but our political leaders across the United Kingdom seem to come divided on when they will actually not apply to us anymore. I mean, I just find the whole thing appalling. Oh, Peter, how have you experienced it? What about your furloughing?
Well, by furloughing, you mean just kind of being made redundant or semi-redundant for like an indefinite amount of time? Or it's wonderful.
Is that great? It's a bit like retirement, only you're young.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's quite nice getting paid still to kind of sit around the house and do nothing. But at the same time, I think the uncertainty of it all is worse. Like, it's a massive negative. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people that I've had conversations with who still haven't been able to get back to work. Like, they're terrified that they're going to be made redundant at the end of it.
Yeah, they probably are.
Well, yeah, probably.
Which will be quite interesting. I think after the First and Second World Wars, when we burnt down the economy, we ended up with quite dynamic periods. So I hope that if we have 5 million people unemployed, we'll unleash a brain wave of new innovations in this country. That would be an upside, a bit of a silver lining. I'm not sure if you can pitch that as a good thing, but I could see it as a potential. Beyond this, why are we in this situation? And should we be more like Sweden or should we be more like France? France has bits of paper to go outside. Sweden, you're allowed to go outside and they trust you to make the right decisions. Perhaps you can tell from my question, which I think is the model.
The paper one, right?
Absolutely. Every good solution in history has always been French. Joe?
So basically, so that's a very interesting question that you posed over there, because I think that's like the £1,000,000 question, really, that every single government is actually trying to answer, and I think everyone is actually struggling with. What's actually quite interesting about this is that I've actually been doing a bit of research around this, and the logic behind this, and what I kind of like came up with is that it's actually inherently flawed. So basically, the approach in Sweden is that it's basically based on the idea of herd immunity, and the idea behind it is to effectively reduce the number of people who will be infected, or who will die from the infection. And in fact, that's probably the very basis of a lot of the governments. And we heard it here when Bunsen said that we need to flatten the curve, and the only way we'll flatten the curve is to basically control the number of people that's going to be infected, and hope that they'll build immunity to it. And then when they do build immunity to it, the idea is that they won't be affected by, or infected by, or reinfected, I should say, by the coronavirus. So
yes.
What I actually thought was interesting about this is that there is one piece in the puzzle that I wasn't qualified to answer, and that is that, okay, what is the probability of actually reinfection? So I spoke to a friend of mine who's interestingly enough doing research on this. He's, I think, as in like laboratory research on this, and he basically said that it's not a guarantee. So just because you actually survive, go through the coronavirus, and you did get you survive it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get reinfected by it, okay, or your body develops an immunity to it. So by that measure, then the overall principle or behind or logic behind herd immunity actually falls into pieces, because if you can't actually say that a substantial percentage of the infected population would who survived the infection would actually develop an immunity and not spread this or contract it again, then logically speaking, then there is there is equal risk for them to actually spread it again. So this is kind of like the interesting thing. So I think the overall arching part to this is I think that I don't think governments actually know or are in a position, or even the scientists know, or are in a position to basically say that this is the definitive way to actually deal with the situation. Your guess is as good as mine, and their guess is as good as ours. And I think that it's up to each individual country to actually take that risk, decide what is the best way for them and their society to actually go through this, and to mitigate those risks as they see fit.
Yes, I understand that there is no guarantee that you can't be reinfected once you've already had it. You won't develop immunity. There doesn't seem to be much evidence for that. So why have we been locked inside our houses?
Doesn't that mean that Sweden's probably got the most sensible approach, right? Because then they're basically going, it's just around, you're going to live with it. Let's just adapt to the situation and carry on as normal.
Yes, I would completely agree with that point. I do think that Sweden has the best policy on this one. But I can see that the extra complicated fact was when this first arrived into our nation, so many people seemed to be contracting it all at once that we would have ended up with a rush into hospitals, and that we would have had overburdened NHS wards, which is the sort of extra metric in this Rubik's Cube.
Goes on Peter's point there. I think it's a little bit premature for us to actually judge that Sweden's got this right, because of their ideology, their principle that let's just get everyone to take a chance and catch it, right? I think we need to kind of like balance that and say that, okay, you know what, when Sweden starts to experience death rates that are of a higher percentage than their than let's say the population, the percentage in the UK and all that, and people are being buried, Swedes are being buried in mass graves, do you think that the Swedes will basically say that, hey, yeah, you know what, we got it right, you know what I mean, this is the right thing to do? So I think that this is one thing that we need to we need to kind of like temper, and I think this is why what I'm saying is that in my original point is that we don't know what the right way is, and I don't think anyone knows what the right way is. And this is why I think personally throughout this period, the thing that that frustrates me is the fact that the amount of criticism that a lot of the governments are actually getting from they're getting because on how they're dealing with it. And the reason why that frustrates me is because of the fact that, once again, there is no definitive, in my eyes, there is no definitive way to actually deal with this, this situation. It's all a matter of opinion, and all a matter of balancing, the pros and cons, and making that, that social and political calculation.
It doesn't necessarily feel like the government's necessarily been calculating it, at least the UK government. They seem to be very reactive to the situation.
Yes, well, I mean, should one do something even if you don't have all the facts? Well, is something always better than nothing? Discuss. I think one of the most insightful comments that I've heard about this whole topic was from someone who was phoning in to respond to an argument between people broadcast on the radio, and their comment was, I agree with both the people talking, even though they hold contradictory points, which I think portrays how complicated and multi-leveled this problem is.
That doesn't really afford a solution, though. That's the problem.
Well, I don't think we got a solution, and I think that's part of the issue, and that's probably why we're talking about it now. But as individuals, how have we coped with the lockdown ourselves? What new habits have we discovered for ourselves? Do we enjoy a 2 o'clock nap in the afternoon? Are we drinking far too much? Certainly, I'm not drinking enough. So what about this? How has this affected your lifestyle? Have you made it more positive, or have you had unabound negative experiences? What do you think? I want to ask Peter first. Peter's lost a lot of weight, I notice. Tell us about that, Peter. What's happened?
Well, I mean, that wasn't just because of the coronavirus.
But I think you fostered good habits which have kept you in good stead.
Oh, yeah. I think it's just a case that in a situation like this, you need to form those habits and keep them, right? You got to you got to take the opportunity when, I don't know, you've not got so much work to do, and you're able to then concentrate on bettering yourself as a person.
And what are these habits, Peter?
Well, exercise, Simon. It's always exercise, isn't it?
That's
a depressing thing about it. Exercising and eating right.
Who likes exercising? Aaron? Maybe.
I do. I enjoy sports. So, I literally went down from probably, training 5 days a week down to 0. So I was actually, telling my friends and my colleagues that, I've got a lot of unexpended energy at the moment, so that I need to expend, which is a challenge.
What a prospect. What training were you doing before?
I used to row actually quite extensively. So, I used to spend Saturday, Sunday mornings rowing, Monday, Wednesday nights in the gym, rowing in the gym. And then usually during this point in the year, during the summer, we also have training after work. So and as I mentioned, usually that's about 3 or 4 nights during the weeknights. So overall, I probably, as I said, I probably train about at least 5 nights, 5 days a week. So Friday's usually my drinking day off, though. I usually keep that for social activities.
For 6 bottles of wine. It's good to have a balance. Very good, all that training. How has being locked down affected that? Obviously, you're not socializing with a rowing crew.
Well, we still do. So I mean, so what I, as you probably know, I'm also the men's captain for the rowing club that I'm with, and because of this, I actually had to devise effectively a plan, as to how we keep people engaged, how we keep people fit, and so on and so forth. I mean, I won't bore you with the reason behind that, but a whole part of it is because, and I know a lot of sporting clubs are actually going through this at the moment. Is that we still have outgoings as a sporting club, but we obviously might lose a lot of subsidies and membership, because why would people pay their monthly membership fee when they can't row or can't have access to the gym and so on and so forth, right? So this is why we had to kind of think of a way on how we can try and keep the membership engaged, and we do things like online online video workouts. We also, and what I actually did is that rather than actually just get something from the internet and post that on, in order to get the entire squad involved, I picked each one of a few of them to basically do a minute clip of them doing one exercise, and then edited that and put that together into a personalized video workout. So yeah, we've got those initiatives in place, and I also, personally, I've been doing like 30-mile per day cycles during the weekend. 10 miles, before work during the weekday. So yeah, trust me, I haven't been bored.
It certainly sounds not like that you have. Very sporty, very active. I mean, do you always wear such a lurid shade of pink when you're out cycling? I'm just imagining it as being quite the sight on a desert.
Unfortunately, I actually don't have the shade of pink as a workout gear. So yeah, no. So if you want to buy me a workout top, Simon, you're more than happy to get that to
If you're still charging fees to a rowing club that can't row, I think you could probably afford your own new uniforms yourself.
I don't get this money, In fact, I even have to pay my fees. So
for myself, I hate the gym. I hate everything about it. I hate being in what feels like a very masculine and aggressive, clunky, heavy metal space. I find it really off-putting, and that's something that I need to work through and get over. But I've been doing lots of home exercising, and because I've been locked in, it's given me a real sort of sense of routine. I feel very imprisoned, because I know when my exercise time is, and I know when my meal time is. And there's something very cathartic about having such a structured existence.
Well, why don't you join us next Tuesday night when we do our online workout program? It's designed for every person of any fitness level, because it's scalable. So, and you'll see the genius behind it.
And what's the dress code?
Well, whatever you dress to work out.
That sounds
boring.
I was hoping it'd be more exciting.
It's very dangerous.
If you want to work out, in a onesie or in a unisuit, that's fine. There's no,
And what about dieting and drinking? Are we drinking more or drinking less during lockdown?
I think that question
depends what you mean by drinking.
What was that, Aaron? You were going to say, I think that question should be directed at me. Was that
I said I think that question was directed at Peter.
Oh, it's one of us. Peter?
Well, obviously, what else are you meant to be doing?
Yeah, have a drink every night. It makes me very mindful that you form tight habits around this kind of thing, and that 7 o'clock comes around and it's time for your whiskey and soda or whatever your poison is. But that's not actually a very good way. And I do try to build into my life drink-free days where we have 2 or 3 days where we don't poison our body, which
once
is probably
a month, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it doesn't come around very often, but yeah.
It's usually when the hangover's too much.
Yeah, and I have discovered during this lockdown that I have lost weight. I think that Peter has lost weight during this lockdown, and Aaron didn't have any weight to begin with, so he's just carried on the good, admirable stance of taking care of himself, which is a very positive mindset, I have to say. Excellent. So the last thing that I want to discuss is something that's just happened, which is Spotify have given Joe Rogan a lot of money to be exclusive on their platform. It's happening in a staggered exclusivity. He will be broadcasting on their platform from September. His work will still be available until the end of the year on other sites like YouTube, but after that, it will be exclusively available, all of it, even the back catalogue, on Spotify. And
even the back catalogue?
Even the back catalogue.
Oh, that's interesting.
On Spotify, which means that they have given him some money. And when I first heard this, I thought, golly gosh, Joe Rogan seems like a very independent kind of chap. They must have given him a lot of money. I guess everyone has their price. Maybe it was 5 million, 10 million. No, my goodness, 100 million for Joe. So that is quite interesting.
By the way, that's 100 million US dollars, not pounds. So it's about 80 million pounds.
Yes.
Oh, only 80 million pounds. Oh, God, I wouldn't even get out of bed for that.
Yeah. But the way the pound is going,
just in case we get fact checked, facts are important.
Facts are important. Yes, you're quite right. So what do we think about that? How can any one broadcaster who hosts a podcast be worth 100 million? What does that actually tell us about the world?
It means that podcasts have made it, because it's basically just radio, isn't it? I'm sure at some point Howard Stern, I think, is worth 500 million, and he was credited with like changing the radio space. Not exactly sure how, but I think he was like the rise of talk radio and that kind of personality driven.
Yes.
It's just the same thing. You're getting, I mean, it's kind of bad for podcasting because podcasting was a bit of a Wild West. And now you're going to get players like Spotify who are really trying to pour as much money into it as possible to basically become YouTube.
Well, yes, I think that would be the consequence. I think that it's interesting that Joe, of all people, he represents something which I think is very of the moment. He's a free thinker, but he's sort of firmly grounded in blue collar work. He is kind of someone that I don't have to Google him and read about his life. I can make educated guesses, and I feel like I've known him for a while. He is obviously very strong, fit, looks after himself, like Aaron, only probably with a bit more bulk. And he doesn't come across as aggressive or threatening. I would like to be in a pub with him for an evening, though he probably, I don't know, he actually is a bit salubrious about how much he drinks. Lovely. Yes.
So I guess my question then is, why is this an issue? So Joe Rogan gets paid 80 million pounds to to have his podcast in Spotify. Why is this a big a topical conversation?
Why is it a topical conversation? I think it's a topical conversation because I think there's something very much of the zeitgeist about him, that in America we have seen the sensible option in Hillary being rejected over the slightly crazier option of Trump. Perhaps we would not frame it like that. I think that's fair enough. But we've also had the sensible option in Britain of Remain being trumped by the slightly crazier option of Brexit. I don't think that those things are inherently wrong, but I do think they represent a real shift away from expert level class of person. And I think that it's interesting that podcasts are actually really carrying that forward. Because
so are you more concerned about the fact that what I guess I'm just trying to understand what the issue that we're discussing regarding Joe Rogan is it because of the fact that a person like Joe Rogan, who is not really necessarily part of the established media class, is being paid a ridiculous amount of money to kind of like bring him to the mainstream? Or is it because of the fact that we feel that we're actually going to lose someone that is and as you probably put it, independent free thinker, and lose him into the mainstream? Which one of those issues are we contending?
I would suggest that it shows that we have really won a free speech point with this, that genuine people who engage in proper ideas and are genuinely entertaining and don't hide behind curation or narratives that they're driving prove to be very popular. I think that you see this with the biggest star on YouTube, which is PewDiePie. He isn't right, he isn't left, he's a free thinker. He often gets criticized by SJW types. And then you also see it with Joe. When he endorsed Bernie Sanders for president over Joe Biden, he was heavily criticized. But again, I think that shows his free thinking. And I think as free thinking people ourselves, we would much rather a Bernie Sanders Wild West solution than a very sensible, boring, and slightly senescent Joe Biden.
I mean, Bernie's got a higher chance of living through term, hasn't he? So.
Inexplicably, yes.
He managed to find the one person who's closer to death than him. In fact, he might already be dead.
Yeah. So
this is why I love our 2020 chances, by the way.
From this point of view, looking forward, I think that Joe represents the sort of everyman on the street and the kind of people that liberal elites would balk at. So, and he's already calling it for Trump because he just can't see how he could go with Biden. So I can imagine that if you want, as Aaron does, 4 more years of Donald J. Trump as president, I think it's almost guaranteed at this point. I don't really see
Aaron doesn't just want 4 more years of Donald J. Trump. Aaron also wants the Speaker of the House. Aaron also wants to increase the majority in the Senate, and Aaron also wants to replace at least one more Supreme Court justice.
to guarantee some sort of Republican everlasting evermore regime in America. I need to remind you, Aaron, that sensible democracies have good opposition, something that we've been lacking in this country for a while. And
except the problem is that the democratic opposition in the United States isn't sensible. It's actually more, it's actually quite idiotic and moronic and, downright crazy. I'm sorry, but when you take advice from people like AOC or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and you quote her as one of her economic policies, you kind of give all hope for a sensible opposition.
Any last thoughts, Peter?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Am I shifting it to the right, Peter?
I wouldn't like to pin myself down to any part of the spectrum.
Yeah, but you understand Joe Rogan's appeal, don't you?
Oh, we still talk about Joe Rogan.
Well, that was the topic.
Yeah, no, but I think there's actually quite a lot of layers to the whole thing of him getting bought out by Spotify, which are both good and probably quite depressing at the same time.
Well, yes.
And you could probably argue that he's past that free thinking stage now.
Yes,
it's going to become part of the problem.
Yeah. From what I understood, though, I think he still has full control of the content. I think the only part of the deal was that exclusivity, that he's not allowed to broadcast it in, let's say, YouTube or anything like that, except via Spotify. But in terms of the content, the way he's going to run the show and all that, I don't think. Well, according to the sources that I've read, it's actually he's got full control of that still. So
it's always difficult to tell in reality when someone's giving you $100 billion.
I agree.
You're probably going to listen to their opinion if they're like, don't do that on air.
It may say in your contract that you don't have to listen to their opinion, but of course you would be slightly interested in it, I guess.
Yes.
This is the question, though. It's how strong of a person is Joe Rogan? I mean, if I was Joe Rogan, what's the price of your, what's the price of the Joe Rogan name, the price of the Joe Rogan brand? I mean, I can tell you now. 100 million. Well, yeah. I can tell you now, though. For instance, if I was in that situation and someone offered me, $100 million for exclusivity, and basically said that I need to toe the line, I can tell you now, I will say no to that without even flinching.
Good golly, what levels of integrity? Anyway, I think that's probably.
I can tell you because I do put a price in my in my personal integrity. There's some things in this world that I don't think they can be bought, and one of them is actually my my integrity and my thought.
Very good. Shall we wrap it up there for our first ever one?
Sure.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Lovely talking to both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely talking to you too.